All right, another Saturday morning episode.
Yeah, my voice sounds nice in the morning.
All right. Yeah,
So it's weird to be over here, though.
does this episode have a title? Like, is this the Officer Roggie?
The Officer Roggie podcast?
Yeah. Okay, so we have Brock in studio today, as always. He is the guest. It's
weird.
It's a good time for it. Things in the first responder world are a little crazy right now. Timely. What would the police's role be in something like this? Like, if you were a police officer out there, like, what are you doing how does your day change when something like this is happening?
With the wildfires?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's just perimeter stuff mostly. Okay. Trying to give some space for them to work. Okay. But it sounds like they don't even have water to work with.
Yeah,
so.
But like over a gigantic geographical area, like just trying to evacuate
thousands
people.
Of acres. Yeah. Evacuations. Yeah.
Yeah. Helping people get out. Did you see the video in the last? No, it was like one of the hurricanes recently, where they had a police cruiser like patrolling around town with a megaphone, just like blasting. Yeah, like get out. Get out. And they're like
real
the only,
ominous.
Yeah, and like there's like the tidal wave coming, and everyone's gone, but this one officer is like stuck in town. Like
this is one job. Telling people to evacuate. Is that it?
Yeah.
We used to do that.
Drop everything.
A couple of the big hurricanes were right before I got down there. So like Irene and Sandy hit Long Island and Connecticut pretty hard. Yep. So, but I know that they did that. Like they would be going down, especially the coastal like beachland areas, and just blasting like, hey, like you gotta evacuate, gotta get out of here. And not everybody listened, I guess.
Is that okay? Is that legally enforceable when you're telling people to get out? That. Do they have to?
I would be surprised if like you can go and forcibly remove somebody from their house.
Yeah,
there's always an argument in
those COVID mandate things. It's like
we're not going to
tell you it's mandatory, but
like your like winter weather travel advisories or whatever. Like I don't know how constitutional that is.
Like, or we're not going to tell you it's not mandatory. We're going to act like it is mandatory.
Right. Yeah,
for your own safety.
For your own safety and for theirs. That's the argument. The argument is, hey, if you don't necessarily need to be out in terrible weather, then you're putting first responders at risk coming to save you when you need help. So I guess there's that, but it's kind of the job. Like that's the job you sign up for. So
not to say that there aren't like actual serious grounds for strongly suggesting people should listen to things that aren't technically mandate. Like we've had examples of things where it's like, why are you trying to make this a mandate? And we've had examples of things that are like, yes, this is a good thing. Like stay off the roads in a terrible storm. Like that's more legit than.
Well, especially if it's something that you don't need to be doing. Like I guess that's kind of the changer for me is that if you can stay indoors in an ice storm or in a blizzard, then don't go like out to dinner maybe, or not that I haven't done that before, but like maybe stuff that's completely unnecessary. You have to realize that if you get in a situation you need help, like you're putting other people's lives at risk then. So, but I mean, that's also life. Like you're just constantly putting people's lives at risk in one way or another, seems like.
Yeah. Sometimes if I think that like the tyranny of our government is getting out of hand, I like remember some things that kind of give me hope. Like for example, like we don't own the public roads.
Right.
And I think people often think the government tries to like control different parts of infrastructure, and that the motive for controlling infrastructure is so that they can then use it to control us. And like, there aren't any laws saying like, no government that I've ever been like under has ever said like, we will arrest you if we see you driving on the road that like we license your ability to drive. We register your car. Some places you pay tax to us on your car. We control the infrastructure that we built and technically we own. Like they've never actually used that power. So like maybe just like people could calm down a little bit. It's not that bad out there. Like the government's not trying to take everything away from you. I don't know. I think
when you look at everything through a certain lens, it's easy to get to that place. Yeah, like if you're already bitter toward the government for some reason, and then something like that comes out and you don't necessarily agree with it, you're going to kind of assume that that's just overreach. Right. When maybe it's well-intentioned and it's just meant to kind of keep some people off the roads or whatever.
Yeah. Another big one is like airports, like air transportation. The government like because of how much they subsidize the air industry, like they pretty much control that regulation wise, I would assume. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but like, I don't think anything ever crazy has happened there. Like, yeah, I don't know. Just think people are a little paranoid about how much the government wants to control our individual day-to-day lives. But anyway.
Well, and how much that like they really can't. There's 340 million people in the country. So, but like you could, I mean, technically when it's hard when you're talking about travel because constitutionally, I'm not sure where the lines are for the ability to restrict travel based on weather conditions, based on perceived threat. So like there's Fourth Amendment, considerations as well. So
unless you're a sovereign citizen and then you don't have to do anything.
Right. Then you're just a traveler.
Did you ever run into that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Let's start there. All right. So this is episode 39.
30 million. I don't know where it's going to be.
And we're going to focus on Brock's law enforcement career. We touched on it a little bit in episode 2, but mostly we didn't get past your academy experience.
Yeah.
Which was like a really cool, honestly could be an episode of its own.
We might have to redo that one someday because that was
interesting.
We were so early on.
Yeah, that'll be good. We'll do a prequel episode later.
There you go.
And then that'll make it even cooler with the context of the career. So
if I can make it that interesting.
It is very interesting. I've probably heard the experience like at least 5 or 10 times, and I still like to listen. Like, it's very interesting, especially the part where you get tased. So,
I don't even know if we could show that. That'd be hilarious.
Oh, that would be great. Okay, so you were not just a beat cop. Like you were like a career-driven law enforcement officer in Connecticut. Had a pretty, from the sound of it, eclectic career in the 5 or 6 years that you did it. Right?
Yeah. I was there from 2016 to 2021
in Milford, Connecticut.
Yep.
And so you have a lot of interesting experiences because they had you doing a few different things here and there. You kind of moved around and tried to get a good variety of jobs, right? You didn't just sit in a car for 6 years.
No. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but while you were sitting in a car for 6 years, you had experiences with guys that were like, "Oh, I have a right to travel. I'm a sovereign citizen."
Oh, sure. Yeah,
okay. So how do those actually go in real life? Those are hilarious.
It's funny because I think like from the 2011 to maybe even like 2018, it seemed kind of like it could have just been because that's when cameras were becoming more popular in cars, so they were trying to record their interactions and put it online. But there was certainly a very violent sect of sovereign citizens.
Oh, wow.
That were executing cops or would not recognize their authority, and then things would escalate and it would be a problem. So like when we were in the academy, it was definitely, I remember focusing on it. I remember watching videos. Here's how you interact with them. Here's what the law says. Here's some things that you can say, but also like be careful because when you're dealing with somebody who thinks that you're a overpowered agent of some government they don't recognize or laws that they don't follow, then you kind of open the door for them to be more belligerent, less obedient, less compliant, and so that just leads nowhere good pretty fast.
Okay, so like some of them have like AKs in the back, like ready to go. Like I didn't know that it would.
Maybe in some places, yeah.
They're just dumb then, because like
nothing that I ever interacted with was like that. So I would be.
There's a level of delusion.
You go up and you ask for your license, registration, insurance, that kind of thing, and then they would say something to the effect of, "I don't have to. I'm a free traveler," and then they would try to throw a bunch of kind of obscure general laws that are kind of misquoted and out of context. And so, yeah, I mean, if pretty much the idea was if you get one of those, then you just kind of call for backup right away just for safety reasons. But no, nothing ever with them was escalated to that degree.
So this is a group of people that would say like, yes, you are using the system and the fact that you control the roads and the registration system and the licensing system to control them, but it's a little bit delusional.
Yeah, it doesn't really hold any legal weight. Oh, they go to court, and the
videos never show how it ends. It's always like the confrontation and then are they correct or are they incorrect?
As far as I'm aware, like it doesn't hold any weight.
Yeah.
It's kind of and if it did, it would have more traction.
Yeah.
Like if there was legitimate breaks in the authority of law enforcement on their ability to stop people that are traveling, then it would be everywhere. Like it would
Yeah.
be hashed out in the courts already.
So how I would think about it, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but how I would think about it is like the whole idea that like our federal income tax system is optional, in that the only thing keeping it afloat is the people, the mass people's misunderstanding of that and willingness to continue paying income tax. And if enough,
Really?
yeah, I've heard that. I don't know if
You
it's,
mean just
here's
like
the thing.
constitutional law says
Right, like-
that we can't be taxed
From what
on our
I've,
income?
yeah,
Interesting.
fact check me, anybody who listens to this, but like from what I understand, it's like if you read what the laws or whatever from when the federal income tax was instituted, which I think everyone says, again, this is all secondhand for me, was like back during like World War II or something
Yeah. Yep.
where the government taxed in an effort to like raise money, and then it just didn't go away. I don't know if that's actually true, but like
Right.
whenever federal income tax laws were written, somewhere in there, it never specifies or directly says that it's meant to be permanent.
Right.
And it was like a temporary. So like it just like didn't go up for revote, or I don't know how it works governmentally, the process. But I would think of the sovereign citizen thing as the same thing. Like just enough people don't really know that they had that
Yeah, it's possible,
constitutional right.
as far as I'm aware.
So it never, but like you're saying, likely not. It's more like not a single one of those sovereign citizen cases that then went to court was ever granted in favor of the sovereign citizen. Like,
Correct.
Yeah. So legally it doesn't have any. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And we would get regular updates, like law updates that we would have to kind of sit through and listen to. And I don't remember if that was ever specifically there, but if it was an issue, it would have been dealt with.
Yeah.
Because I think I want to say from 14 probably to 16, especially right before I got on, it was a bigger issue, especially out in the Midwest. Like it was becoming a problem.
Now, what kind of people like would generally be trying to pull this off? Like legit believers in that kind of thing, or like people trying to get away with something?
Yeah, it's hard to know. It seems like they believe it.
Weird
Yeah, it's
place to
hard
draw
to-
the line.
I just don't know. Yeah.
Like a license costs like $40 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to register your vehicle every 2 years, but get a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't understand it. Like there are like more expensive things to try to avoid than like
for sure.
vehicle registrations.
Oh,
and
definitely.
licensing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So you graduate the academy, which we'll talk about later. And you, well, why don't you start at the end of the graduation? Like you get to the end of your academy time, and was there a point in your schooling that you were like, okay, I'm actually going to finish and graduate, and they're going to offer me a job? Did you know that early on, or was that like, how late in the process did that occur?
So Connecticut doesn't have sheriff's departments at all. So there's really not like a civil service exam the same way there is in New York. So New York would have an exam that you can take, and then you can go to academy without being hired. Then once you graduate, then you get job applications. I'm pretty sure Corwin can fact check me on that. But Connecticut, you're hired before. So once you went through the whole process, which we highlighted a little bit the last time, like you meet with the chief and you get a conditional offer
Before the academy.
Before the academy. Okay. Yep. And then really you're working for that department, for that city, while you're in the academy.
What is the conditional offer? Graduation?
I don't remember the fine print.
Okay.
But yeah,
mostly graduation.
I think so. Like I think that you have to complete your certifications, and then you're actually on a year of probation as well. So
right. The academy was 7 months, right?
Yeah.
So did the year include the academy, or it's after the academy? Your probation.
After. Yeah. So it's 7 months.
Okay.
In the academy, then 10 weeks of field training. So that's when you have somebody next to you teaching you the ropes, kind of, and the day-to-day interactions. Like it's so different from classroom or having a drill instructor tell you something, or firearms instructor, or de-escalation tactics. All that is so different in a classroom from when you're talking to the public. Yeah. It's just night and day different. So that 10 weeks is a really important thing, because
10 days,
10 weeks.
Oh, 10 weeks of field training.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's more like learning the systems, learning specific policies in the department.
Basics.
Yep. Yeah. All of that kind of stuff. How to answer a radio, all the stop techniques, you have to apply them, and just a million different directions that you don't really know unless you're in the position.
They teach you to touch the taillight when you walk by.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
I know.
You know cop stuff.
I think you told me, but now I know. Is it to leave a fingerprint in case of emergency situation? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's the idea is that if something goes sideways and they need to find that car later, your fingerprints are technically on it.
Yeah.
I don't ever know if I remember hearing of like where they were dusting the back and saw the prints and that's how they identified the car. I'm sure it's happened. Why else would we do it? Yep. But after that 10 weeks, that's a really great idea. You kind of get an idea for how it is, and then you're in your car by yourself. Mm-hmm. So once you pass that, you're your own guy, and then it's a year of probation.
Yeah. So we talked about in the last the second episode or whatever that the academy was pretty intense.
Yeah, it's crazy.
7 months is that's a long time. Isn't that longer than like New York State Trooper School? 6 months or something.
Yeah.
Like that?
It just depends. Yeah. Like I think that crazy. Typically people would say 6 months, nationwide. I think it's kind of known, but ours was a little bit longer. And I don't know why that was exactly, but
like 2 semesters of college worth of education. Yeah.
Like 8 hours a day. Yeah. So
that's pretty wild.
And that's kind of the part where, a lot of people will say that cops are undertrained in the academy. They don't get enough training as much as they should. And 7 months is not nothing.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. And when you're there, so we spoke about it a little bit in the episode before, but we had a commuter academy, which is nice in some ways, but not so nice in other ways. So your state police would go to a barracks and they would stay there Monday through Friday, and then they would be released probably for a couple of days. And then come back. That didn't like that. If you're in a non-commuter academy, that means that you're under their thumb the entire time. Right.
You're even in your off time. Yep. You got to keep things nice and straight. Is that right? They can.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it is a little nicer to not have to do that,
especially initially. Because you're there, they'll mess around with you more.
Yeah.
But I think that at least from my experience with the CSP, Connecticut State Police Academy, it's kind of at some point they kind of ease off and start to get you more comfortable because the initial period is rough and it's a lot of drills and they're on top of you all the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of other types of basic training. Everyone knows that Navy SEAL training, that first 2 weeks is everyone knows what that looks like.
Yeah, Hell Week. Yeah. Yep.
Or basic training in the military. That first period is awful. That's what you went through.
Yeah.
First period is awful.
And I think too that because the academy I went to has a very good reputation for being one of the toughest to go through. Mm-hmm. And so our instructors know that. Our drill instructors know that. And I think too that the fact that we were able to go home at night, that just made them keep on harder for the entire 7 months.
Yeah.
I don't remember maybe the last week or two, some kind of little bit of ease ups. We weren't allowed to talk at lunch for 4 months, 5 months maybe. And because they were over top of us, they were watching us, they were watching what we were eating, they were making sure we were sitting up straight, they were making sure, all of this stuff. And people can have their opinions about all of that, but we'll get into that at some point. But I think there's so much value to a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. I have so many questions. Did stuff like that stick with you? To this day, I don't like talking when I'm eating. Anything like that?
Yeah. I'm at the dinner table with my family.
Everyone's
with my hands on my lap.
Kids are traumatized. Dad never talked at dinner.
Why will he not make eye contact with me?
He stared at the wall. His mind was somewhere else every mealtime. Yeah. Back in mom.
No. I do think about a lot of the other stuff, the other benefits of that kind of thing, but not specifically. I'm still who I am.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Whenever you go through something super difficult, everybody's like, how did it change you? And it's it definitely changes you, but it's not that it changes a part of you that wasn't there already. It kind of brings another part out of you. It's kind of what we talked about with Bob Chamberlain a little bit about bringing out the potential in you to exceed a higher calling or to reach a plateau you didn't think you could get to before. And attention to detail and discipline and consistency have always been struggles for everybody. And so those being drilled into your head like that, like there's parts where you can just kind of turn it on now. So there's so many things about all of that was really good.
Yeah.
But no, I don't sit at my table and
block
everybody else out.
There's like lights on, but
very
no one's home.
very antisocial.
Yeah, I would assume that there's a lot of that stuff, like those basic training antics that at the time are kind of a ruse, but you buy in because like you're also a little scared to get yelled at. But in the back of your mind, the objective here is just don't laugh and you'll be fine. Yeah,
I didn't feel like that at all for me.
No.
Like it was so foreign to me. Like I'm not from a military family. I'm not from a law enforcement family. Yeah. And so I basically went in cold turkey. I had no idea what to expect. Yeah. And that first week shook me like to the core.
Kidding.
And I was just like, I never had the feeling, if I would do it now again, I'd be like, oh, okay, I understand that there's purpose behind this stuff. And it's not just to break me down, but there's legitimate reasons why this is happening and take it a little less serious.
Yeah. You will never experience it
for the first time.
It's a one-time experience. Yeah.
Right.
Because you get it, and first you don't get it, then you get it, and you'll never experience it the same again.
And they were hard on us. And I think that partially was because we were really good. Like we were breaking a lot of records in the academy, and like we were super athletic, very book smart, and like we were doing a really good job. So I think that they put the hammer down even harder just to kind of push us more. That's good leadership.
Yeah, weird. You'd think like, oh yeah, there's no incentive to do better. But like the right people for the job are the exact opposite. It's a little unintuitive. Like it's the right pressure to do better and better and better.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, maybe this is a little depressing, but like, I don't know that most people are like that. Like those are exceptional individuals that respond positively to more pressure when they are already performing at a high level. Like most people, they want you to put the brakes on. The problem is that a lot of, no judgment, but like, I think just humanity wise, like it's possible and people can change and maybe our default setting is laziness, but like a lot of people would desire to perform well to try to escape discipline and pressure. But like the exceptional people, their automatic response is to perform better. Like it fuels them and drives them, which is interesting.
Yeah.
People perform to try to escape the pressure.
It's not a job that you can escape pressure.
Yeah.
So
there's like a method to the madness. Like no matter how well you do here, like the job doesn't get easier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't get to arrive on call and be the one who's supposed to bring order to the situation and get overwhelmed and walk away. Like you don't get to do that.
Yeah. A job well done doesn't mean like all crime is done. You did it. You get to go home for the day and like tomorrow's going to be better because you did a good job today. Like it doesn't work like that.
Right. It's just the nature of the job. That's not how it works.
Oh, man, that's really interesting.
The people who were teaching us were exceptional. I could go through all of their names, but I won't. They are just people that I still look up to. The drill instructors are just world-class individuals who, like when you're watching interviews of guys like Navy SEALs and that kind of stuff, I get the same impression. These are guys who had military careers that were exceptional in their military careers, and like they have a thing about them that no matter what comes up against me, I'm going to be able to handle the situation as well as I would be able to. So like that in and of itself is a superpower that most people don't have nowadays at all. And like you said, I think the default position is laziness for sure. In my own life, I can see that for sure, where you get complacent, you get comfortable. Oh, it's time to relax.
Potential. Yeah. Most people have a lot of unrealized potential, and like they just need some kind of internal or external spark to like get them going. They just need a push in the right direction. And like, life is sometimes like chancy like that.
Yeah.
But for you, it was like, it happened to you, right? Like that's kind of how you were probably always going to make a good police officer. Just, you've talked about that before. Like you have the right qualities, and your mom was always thought that would be a good thing for you. But like, still it came down to kind of a leap of faith, chance opportunity that you just happened to like pursue. Like, people just need to push in the right direction.
Definitely.
And unfortunately it comes later in life for some. I don't know. It's an interesting philosophical thing. Like I said, it's not a judgment thing. It is all like unprovable and theoretical, and I just think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Not all people respond that way. Not all people respond that way, which means the job's not for everybody.
Yeah. Yep. So you were saying that as the academy went on, like you noticed they kind of would ease up, but probably you said it didn't happen until like quite late.
I think normally it would happen quicker than it did for us.
Okay. So
seems like,
so it still might've been a bit of a shock. So if it happened late, that wasn't like you were eased into the easing up. Like it was like intense. And then at the very end, they eased up. So going into your, like the actual, like graduating and going into like the field, you might have still had a little like from people, like from the intensity.
Well, so you work with these guys after.
Yeah, and they're super cool, right? Like, how was the dynamic shift from weird. Them yelling at you to like, that's all right, man, like we're just going to go on a patrol and I'm not going to yell at you anymore. You can relax.
Yeah, well, actually, one of our drill instructors was one of my FTO officers. So, but no, it's weird because our senior drill instructor is the most disciplined man I've ever met in my life. In the military, in the Marine Corps for quite a while before that, like a long time. And I don't know if it was Korea or Vietnam. I can't remember. Like,
how old is this guy?
He's up there.
Wow.
It might not have been one of those wars, but I know that he
been around a while.
Yeah, like there's just so many things. Like everything was exactly perfect all the time. That's how we saw him. And when we finished our firearms training, which would have been later, I want to be at like the 5 or 6 month mark probably. So late, like pretty soon before academy graduation. He kept his hat on, would never let us see him without his hat on, ever. And it was always at 2 points above the nose, and it was tilted down, and he was fair and firm, and he just did so much of what he did. You could tell he really cared about what he was doing. So he came in after we had all passed our firearms qualifications and took his hat off. And we were like emotional almost. Like some of the guys were almost emotional to be like, we've earned like his respect. And like that was a big deal for us. So, you know, when you're then going to a work environment with those people after, as long as you're not like, I don't know why you'd even hold a grudge. It was all for a purpose. And it wasn't like it wasn't like any of the punishment, air quotes, was because they didn't like us. It was because they wanted us to be better.
Yeah.
And like that's the frame that you have to think of it through, and then you have no problem. And nobody had any problems with them.
I was going to say, do you think that anybody who graduated couldn't grasp that concept?
No way.
Yeah.
No way. I can't imagine getting in a frame of mind where that's like you're going to be bitter about that. The guy was doing his job, or
if you graduated 7 months of the academy, you came out, thanks to them, you came out the smartest you've ever been,
thanks
the fittest
to them.
you've ever, probably over 100% the fittest you've ever been. Like you owe a lot to them. Like why would you be upset? Like they made you the best version of yourself that you probably have ever been in your entire life.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
There would not much to be upset about.
Yeah.
No, that would be my perspective, I'm sure, but I'm never know. But anyway, okay. So you go into field training. They're like, your coworkers, but kind of not your, maybe, would it be appropriate to say your friends, brothers, like it's a professional relationship, but you go from, the intense relationship to the, like now we're equal and we're here to have each other's backs, and it's not so much of a top down relationship.
Yeah. Definitely not as much as in the academy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was that like? Did that ease you up at all, or did you already have an understanding that the stakes are just as high?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not something that I thought about too much. No. It wasn't like, it just didn't enter my mind a lot, because when you're on the job and you're going call to call, it's just about who you're next to and handling the situation and then moving on to the next one. And you find out pretty quick, like kind of your standing, I guess is a good way to put it, like how other people maybe feel about you on calls. And that's what really matters. The other semantics don't really matter so much. But yeah, your team. So like when you show up, my life could be in their hands. Their life could be in my hands. Yeah. So that understanding, I think, maybe is what flips it to make it not awkward.
You know what's interesting about that is like most jobs, I don't know, maybe like lower level jobs, coworkers, I've found like friendship is important because you're both a lot of times you're looking to entertain yourself in the job, looking to get through the day. And so a lot of times coworkers become friends.
Right.
But in a job like this, where the stakes are a lot higher, it's very serious. You're supposed to take it seriously. Your lives are in your hands. The most important thing to each other as coworkers is, can I trust you to do your job so that we're all safe? And the friendship and the companionship is like way less of a factor. That probably comes after. Like,
I would agree with that.
Comes after that. Like
after
the most
shift,
important thing
after
is,
that's established already, the trust is established.
Yeah, that's very
Definitely.
interesting. Like that is like Bob was talking about, jobs that are worthy, like endeavors that are worthy. I don't know. There's something, I'm not going to be able to explain it in words, but there's something about that dynamic, is that you're, as coworkers, you care less about, are we going to be friends and get through the day, and more like, your ability to watch my back is the most important thing to me. That's like a worthy job. Like there's something there that it means something. It's very serious.
Competence is absolutely number one.
What would it have been like? I imagine that you were on the better end of that spectrum. What would it have been like for officers that felt like they didn't have a partner? The trust wasn't there. Like, was that common? How would that have gone? Like, is that even a doable situation? Or
there's probably, it's hard because there's a varying range of abilities, skill sets, and somebody who may not be as physically pronounced to handle a situation or have the command presence might be better at de-escalating than somebody else.
Okay.
So there's a range, and ideally you'd want everybody to be the best at all of those things. Right. And that's kind of what you have to be. And then when you couple that with the experience of being with people on calls and knowing who you can trust based on how they handled situations in the past, definitely is something in your mind. You don't want to be you don't want to be in a situation where you show up to a call and somebody else comes and you're like, oh man, I guess it's just me then. Because things can go sideways so quick, and like milliseconds, split seconds, and you need somebody who's going to respond appropriately. And I don't think that law enforcement is a job that you can do passively. It's just not. And if that's how you view law enforcement, you need to get out.
Like, do you mean like you can't just show up to work and get through the day? Like, you have to be mentally present and take it seriously. And not just try to like clock in and clock out. That's kind of what you mean.
Right. Yeah. There's just too much. And especially in the city settings. I mean, we've all seen the videos of cops who are 400 pounds and they fall over when they try to chase somebody. And it's just like, it's not the job to do that for. Like maybe you can get away with that in some professions, but you can't here. You just can't. It's not only like for you, but for everybody you work with, or somebody you're trying to pull out of a burning fire. Like you have to be at your best. You just do.
It's like a dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about that either.
Like, when you're not at your best, it's more dangerous for you as well as everyone around you. Everyone knows it's your danger to everyone around you, but you're like, if you're worried about your spouse or your kid, like becoming a law enforcement officer, it's like, well, if they're really, really good at their job and they go to work prepared, like you have less to be worried about.
Right.
It's the ones that clock in and clock out, don't take care of their bodies, stuff like that.
That's the one. Don't take care of their families. Don't take care of their mental state. They don't balance, how much overtime they're doing with something else. It's easy to see. You go on the internet, you can see cops that are burnt out, totally burnt out, and that's just not a recipe for anything good.
What does burnt out look like? Temper, impatience, inability to manage a situation. Like, what do you mean? What does that look
laziness too. But I think everything you just said more so. Just the kind of attitude stuff, the more irritable, less responsive, less caring, has their own things going on, not present.
Not present. It's a big one.
Super quick to be offended. Like, this is not a job where you can, you're wearing a camera and you're in 4K all the time. And actually, I know that there's departments, I won't say which ones, but they now have live feeds through their cameras that can be accessed through the department which is stinking cool. So basically,
in real time, you mean?
In real time, okay. Yeah. So like, if there's a situation going on, let's say, and the supervisors want to get like eyes on from the department,
they can help you out because they're in your ear potentially too, right? Like, hey,
yeah,
you need to go this direction.
Yeah, they'll have radios and dispatch and whatnot. But like, imagine not having to wait to bring the camera in and dock it up and let it sync and then download it and then, be able to view it on a computer in real time. You can kind of, for a command situation, I have hands on. Like I know what I'm seeing. I can direct things as I need them. I'm in correspondence with fire and EMS if I need them for anything. Yep. Really cool feature, which we didn't have when I was there.
Pretty standard operating procedure for other types, like in the military. Like that's very standard. Like there's a guy in the sky, Eagle Eye Command guy like guys go out on patrol. There's somebody in the back that has a live feed of things in the command center.
Yeah, it's just like that.
That's kind of getting into the police. Seems like
it's so cool, right?
I should have come in a long time ago, but
like a natural evolution of how that would go. But like in my mind, when I was told that, I was like, I would have never thought that because we didn't have that. But how valuable could that be? Super. Or how about this? You go to a car stop and your body camera's on, and you get injured, you get hurt, and there's no radio chatter. Right. I can see exactly what that officer's seeing right now. Yeah. Maybe his radio fell off and he's bleeding out somewhere. I can see him. I can get him what he needs. Because a lot of times those things escalate so quickly that you could just say like, 1:48 I'm a car stop at such and such. I'm going to be making contact with one male, license plate Alpha Bravo Charlie 123. Yeah. And then be like 10-4, we'll send another unit. And then you can 66 the unit and tell them like, I don't need you. But however far away that is.
Before this live camera thing, was the radio the only, like, there was no life alert button on the vest that you could, if you lost your radio, you could always say, I'm in danger. Like, there was nothing like that.
On the top of the radio, it's the radio. There's a red button on the top of the radio. But also...
the radio comes off.
Yeah, if you don't have your radio, then you're kind of on your own. And this is why you can't depend on anything else. Like, you need to be a well-oiled machine when you're on the job. There's just no room for these kinds of errors. Like, okay, if I don't have my radio, am I competent enough to take care of myself if help doesn't come? Because that happens too. Like, situations change all the time. I just saw a YouTube video the other day where somebody just was stopping a car and it was just a normal car stop and everything was going fine. And somebody came up that had nothing to do with the stop and assaulted the cop.
Totally unexpected.
So if you're stopping that car and you tell your unit, like, it's just grandma, like she was going, she rolled through a stop sign or whatever. I don't need any cover for that. Well, somebody comes across the street right then and knocks your radio off and you're in a fight and nobody knows. Yeah. Like, you have to be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's a good thing these live camera things are a thing now because we just told everybody how to what to do in that situation. But
no, I think it's great because so like if you're in a situation that's even bigger than that and you need eyes on, like active shooter situation or whatever, like, okay, I need this many more resources right now sent to this person in this location. Yeah. I can imagine from like a crisis management or like command management. I could see how that would be like a huge tool. It's like having a drone up above you, kind of.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really nice.
That is interesting.
So, but like, you can't rely on that stuff.
What would be cool is if in the near future, if like automatic drone capability got, well, yes, that's where I was going. Dang it. No. Yeah. If like automatic drone capability got to a point where like every police car was equipped with a drone that you stop, you press a button,
just follows you,
and the drone deploys and then hovers over the stop or the situation. And got a live. That would be dope. It doesn't seem not doable, right? That seems.
Oh yeah, seems.
It seems like how far. Yeah, police budget's getting cut everywhere.
There's dash cameras too. There's dash cameras too. That is a great idea. Yeah, it kind of deploys up above and gives you like a bird's eye view of what's happening.
Right. I mean, if you have like a signal between the car and the drone doesn't need somebody piloting it. Like drone technology is crazy. Yeah. Like you just need the money to do it.
Like drone batteries and like how long, like would it follow you for 20 minutes? And some interactions are hours.
Right. And if obviously the car would charge it, but if you've got to stop 5 minutes apart and you just used up, I don't know.
That is a cool idea.
drones.
Could you imagine?
Put 2 drones on the car, and they go
Every
back
car
to
gets 10
alternately.
drones. We're practical solutions here, man.
See, the problem is here's the problem is if you go that direction, it's not long before the drones are starting to get outfitted with like firearms.
Oh
Like,
yeah, it starts to get you dystopian pretty quick.
yeah, and then
Well, they do have the technology for drones to follow you around, so it's not like it's not unheard of.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if
as
there
a
was something
slippery
to
slope, I guess.
that. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, like not a good look. Like if there's a stop and like this dystopian drone is like hovering over.
Yeah,
and, like it's like this far from like things going a little too
You know,
crazy.
maybe they maybe like a road supervisor or something could have one and checking on his guys. Yeah.
So, how easy is it, or how difficult is it to share experiences that things that you responded to? I was going to ask you. So now you're doing your 10 weeks of field training.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure in that first 10 weeks you probably is when your first intense situation.
Second call.
Second call. Is that something that you find difficult to talk about, or would you mind sharing? Like, what was your police career, your very first response to an emergency, like emergency intense response? Is that something you don't mind talking about?
Not my first fender bender.
No.
We got out of briefing my first day, and they actually kind of correlate. So I'll put it in this way. And me and my FTO went to just a small motor vehicle accident. First call out of briefing, and as we were there, we kind of got this call over the radio, pretty intense, and basically saying like there's somebody dodging cars on the traffic on the highway, and the state police are trying to get a hold of him, and we were like a mile away. Mm-hmm. So it was like, okay, like we're going. So we kind of dropped that accident and flew up there. And I remember as we're flying up there, of course, like a lot of things run through your head. Like this is like we're about to get into it. Like this is the first time something serious is happening. And
were you shocked? Like? Were you like, oh, this stuff actually does happen? Like,
oh yeah.
What was your thought?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, like you can do simulations all you want.
Oh, I thought it'd be like a long time before, like day 2 or whatever you said.
No, day one.
Yeah,
day one.
Yeah.
Second call day 1, so it was still in the morning. And
right away.
Yeah. So a guy was on like some kind of acid or psychedelic drug episode on the middle of I-95, dodging cars. And we were able to, it's amazing when you're dealing with people who are emotionally disturbed persons like EDPs, or somebody who's high on some kind of narcotic or whatever, like they just don't feel pain the same way. PCP is the same way, which might have been what this guy was on. They don't feel pain, super strong, just kind of, I don't know what it is.
There's no like mental inhibition either.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know what it is about the neural pathways that shut off to pain.
Makes them very dangerous.
But also like some of the hardest times holding people down has been when they're on those, and you're almost like, it gives them like super strength or something. It's amazing. So downpouring rain, on the highway, we were able to get a hold of him, get him subdued a little bit. They had tased him at some point on the highway, but was ineffective. And
that's wild.
I remember walking up to him, and as he was cuffed and we were getting ready to put him in the car, he looked at me, mm-hmm. and he looked straight through me. He had no idea I was there. And I remember that moment being like, what am I doing?
Stay on your toes.
Yeah. Like the whole depth and seriousness of the situation certainly came through. Like, oh, this is my job now. Like, I'm supposed to take care of this now. Wow. Yeah, so it was kind of eye-opening a little bit. Something
the academy couldn't have prepared you for?
I don't know how you
got you right to where, and then like the rest had to take
I don't know how you could. Yeah. I don't know how you could prepare somebody for like the real life. And that's why you have the 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Because if I was to go to that by myself, that would have been a lot bigger struggle. Yeah. You can go and talk to your FTO about it. What do we do? What do we do right? What can we do better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's amazing to go from a tiny fender bender to something like that, or to go to, something really kind of menial task, more administrative, like a motor vehicle accidents are just administrative, as long as there's no injuries. if there's no injuries, it's just paperwork, talk to your insurance company, you need a tow truck, okay, and then you have them on their way. To go from something like that to immediately into go mode is something that the academy teaches you for sure. Because I have no other explanation for why I would be able to just turn it on like that and turn it off. Imagine there's the clip of the chief in Milwaukee, and he's talking about, how he's getting updates on a horrific crime involving, a child, and he's at a news conference, and they start picking him because he's on his phone.
Right.
Because he's in a news conference and you're on your phone. No, you're not really paying attention. He's getting updates on a child that was murdered.
Yeah.
And before that, he was answering questions like nothing happened. And then that situation happened, and now he has to go into this totally different mode that nobody else understands clearly. Right. And when you watch that, you're like, the public has no idea. None. And I don't care. The only people that I know who have any kind of idea what that's like would be the military, and to some degree, firefighters and maybe even EMS, but it's such a different dynamic to what we do or what we did. It's just, the range of responsibilities is so much broader than even for firefighters and for EMS. Not
a firefighter, not an EMT, but I imagine the biggest difference between policing and those would be, one is, I'm probably going to get crucified for this, but one is a little more predictable. You don't know what you're going to be getting into as far as what the trauma looks like, or what specific tactic you're going to need to employ to deal with the problem that you're rolling up on. And there is obviously still danger involved, but with policing, the wild card is even more
yeah.
Is it safe to say it's more dangerous? Is that what would you say is different about policing? Unpredictability.
So it's interesting.
There's levels of unpredictability in all of them, but policing, it seems like it's just more intense.
Nobody is murdering firefighters.
Okay, yeah, there's that too.
And really, assault on firefighters is much, much less. Now, listen, firefighters is a totally different job, and they risk their lives in different ways.
Right.
And they have to have an entirely different skill set than law enforcement does. So it's hard to compare them. Yeah. For anybody who's listening, there's maybe on state side, civilian side of things, or non-military side of things, there's any emergency response stuff is some of the most purposeful stuff you can do. And so if you're looking for purpose in your life and you're looking for a drive to do something that's meaningful, get into EMS, become a paramedic, drive an ambulance, help people,
they're
be a firefighter.
Part of
oh my goodness,
our society
look
going.
At California right now. They're just heroes. They're heroes. They're finding water in spigots and throwing it with their hats. They're just in a precarious situation, but that's something, I guess, different. I don't know. It is true what you said. Law enforcement has the heightened sense of risk to unknown, and it can change because firefighters, when the bell rings, they know what they're going to. Broadly speaking, it's a structure fire.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, it's a motor vehicle accident. It's not. There's a disturbance. We don't know what's happening.
Go figure it out.
Yeah, there's shots fired. Go figure it out. And that's really what law enforcement really is. And there's been many times where you'll get a report of something, you get there, it's something totally different.
Interesting.
And so, it could be, there's some kids playing around. It's actually a gang fight. Or there's some loud noise over here or whatever, and there's an assault taking place.
Yeah, that's something that that right there, that exact idea is something that I think people need to appreciate more, is that your intel is often not the best. The best intel you're going to have is when you is after you arrive on the scene. Yeah. So much of the responsibility of handling the situation is on the responding officer, because even in the 21st century where you'd think that things were perfect and intel was perfect, it's still pretty primitive. What you hear on the radio before and what you're responding to, is it true that you almost take that with a grain of salt every time, and that you're really only going to know after you show up and assess with your own eyes? There's a ton of risk in that. And I don't think people appreciate enough how no matter how much intel you get before you've arrived, like you're rolling up on an unknown and it's on you to assess what's going on. And it's all like split decisions every day, all day. People do not appreciate that enough. Like we don't know everything. A lot of a police officer's job is figuring things out on the spot and figuring out how to handle it. It's like all quick, high pressure decisions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the variables are so much more wide ranging. Like there's really only so many contingencies when you're going to a car accident or to a structure fire or whatever. Whereas with what law enforcement is asked to do today, we can get into that a little bit too. I'm not sure that I don't think it should all be placed on just the shoulders of law enforcement. It seems like that's kind of become what's happened. Okay, mental health crisis, just go deal with it. Like I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not, there's a wide range of things that kind of law enforcement just gets tied into. I'm not an insurance expert. I'm not this, I'm not that, but it's just kind of expected that, well, you have to go to everything because when people call about their flower pot being stolen, that's what you go to. But also, if there's a really complex fraud claim, you're doing that as well. It just seems like there's so many possibilities for what we're supposed to be experts at, or what they're supposed to be experts at. And the good part is that, at least for my department, the training was so good. And even after we had graduated, the training was so good. We were constantly getting training for anything that we wanted to do, anything that we thought maybe we needed to know. And that really just allows for the department to function well because you have higher quality officers. And that's just because they had decided that was going to be a part of their culture. They were going to invest in that. So
yeah, it sounds like resources equals quality and safety.
Definitely.
Like,
yep.
The comparison that I make would be like the military, which has an enormous budget, can fly a $2 billion automatic drone over a situation with $1 million cameras and get a bird's eye view. Like all this stuff can happen before you send the guys in, but like the average police department does not have that budget, and they send you off to figure things out.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yep.
Like this is why you don't cut police budgets. Like you give resources because that equals quality and safety. Yeah. I don't think people get that.
And police officers are not psychologists. They're not, there's so many things that police officers are not that they're tasked to deal with.
Cutting budgets and asking for more.
And deal with perfectly. And it's just like, you're going to set yourself up for mistakes that way. I use the mental health as an example because it seems like most of the higher profile issues in law enforcement has something to do with, a psychological episode and or drug use. And then it becomes kind of like, well, they weren't equipped to deal with that. It's like, but who are you going to put that at the feet of? Because if there's anybody who's more overwhelmed than law enforcement, I would say mental health professionals are probably way up there. It's a crisis, and like, how do you deal with it? And the answer is you get specialty training, and we had a lot of psychology stuff in the academy. So I wouldn't say that we understood how to de-escalate. That was a big push when I was first in the academy. How to deal with kind of people where they're at and figure out how to help them the best way possible, which is hard to do. Like, we don't write prescriptions. We don't refer people to a counselor, we commit people if we need to. And even that in and of itself is like, you have to you're taking somebody's freedom away. So like you have to approach that with the weight that it carries.
Yep.
And I think back to your point before, just to piggyback, was law enforcement is, like I said, the heightened sense of possible threat. Whereas, I'm not sure, I can't speak to EMS that much, like paramedics, because they're dealing with people a lot of times. And so
traumatic
where
injury.
we are,
Crazy.
where we are,
Different set of rules.
our fire department is also EMS. as well as an ambulance company
Okay.
that has paramedics. But so all of our firefighters were paramedics, as far as I know.
Oh, okay.
And they had their own ambulances and stuff like that. So I had such huge respect for firefighters. There's always like the, police versus firefighters kind of connotation. Stigma. Yeah, the stigma. And but when it really came down to it, our firemen were just phenomenal. Took their job seriously. Were the kinds of guys that you would want if you got in a big wreck to show up. Just outstanding. Mm-hmm. But there's something about going to an unknown situation and having to be always on to possible threats. Dr. Stephen Gilmartin he was a Phoenix police officer, I think, for 20-something years, and then he has his doctorate in psychology now. He's probably had it for 20 years. I don't know. He wrote a book, and it really outlined a lot of these things of why cops have higher rates of suicide, why cops have higher rates of divorce, higher rates of alcohol use, especially compared to firefighters and other emergency responders. And really what he came down to is just the neurochemistry of your brain. He's just talking about how you can't be at that heightened of an alert sense all the time and not have it have severe ramifications. Mm-hmm. He called it parasympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And how when you go to these situations or you're on a shift for 8 to 12 hours, depends on what kind of department you're at, you don't come back down to baseline. When you go home, you go way below. Well, then that's going to affect everything in your home life. Like you essentially you crash. You don't come back to homeostasis. Mm-hmm. And that clicked with me because my first couple of years before he came and spoke to us was like, I felt like I was in a fog. Like I felt like when I got home, I would just like collapse into my couch. Mm-hmm. And stuff like that really wasn't my personality, and it was just the job.
Yeah. Can you, population of the area that you worked in, like very busy, high population, like not a rural town police department. Like it was
city.
It was
so there was
more intense
within I think it was 10 square miles, maybe 15 square miles. There's about 1 million people, residents.
Yeah. So that kind of would explain, because there are levels to it, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So that kind of would explain, like your police experience was on the more intense side of police careers.
Yep, definitely.
There are more relaxed areas to live, and there are more intense areas to live. And you would have been in a probably population rate. It's usually a highest correlation with population, right?
Yeah. So where I was located is a lot of beach, so pretty high traffic city, anyways. But I-95 split right through our city. So the commuter traffic on a daily basis would probably double the population easy. Just with stops from the highway and all the stuff in the surrounding cities. So very, very busy, very busy. A lot of times, depending on what shift you're on, you could just go call to call to call to call for 8 hours straight. Obviously some days were less than that, and some days were more. Some days you're being pulled off calls to go to other calls, and it's just the way it is. But yeah, it's very different to be in a rural setting. And we talked a little bit with Sheriff Carpinelli about that, like, cause he would know. He was in Rochester, and Rochester, New York is, like, as far as policing goes, that's a place to be if you want to be a proactive police officer. And very different culture shock to be in, like, no, you're kind of Andy Griffith now. Like you're kind of more of the people. When you're in a situation in a big city, it's hard to give the same level of attention that you would if you were in a small town, just for obvious reasons. You don't have the time, and sometimes that's hard because you want to give the public the service that they are owed, that they pay for. Really, you are there to protect, but you're also there to serve, whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, it's very different from where I grew up.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that there's context on how your day-to-day looked like as far as intensity. So you were saying when you realized, like, yeah, I'm a couple of years in and I'm experiencing those super highs and then the super lows, and I've lost that middle as far as brain activity and all that. How did you find a way to cope with that, or was that always a struggle?
I think just knowing that was happening was big for me, because I had definitely, I wouldn't call it depression, but I definitely felt like off. Definitely felt like the job was maybe getting to me a little bit. It's hard to go every day and see the stuff that you see and just kind of have to deal with that. Also, I was on my own. I was in a state by myself. So I didn't really have a support system close by at all. So that was tough. And I think that once I realized that, maybe it was only the first year that I was on the road and we had that conference. But then just understanding like, oh, okay, like it's my brain. It's just the job reacting to my physiology. And
Interesting.
How do you make it better? Well, so he did outline a lot of things in the conference of like how you combat that. And he's like, you have to get up and go do things. Like you can't just go home and sit there and watch TV all night and then, go to sleep, dream about what you saw that day and then get up and do it the next day. You can't do that. He's like, go to your kids' soccer games. Well, I didn't have any kids. Go to the gym. I can do that. Eat better. I can do that. Which is hard to do in a police job when you're working midnights sometimes. But like, I can do those things. I can, I had a roommate at the time, Aaron, and he worked with me. We graduated together and he's doing wonderful things now. But like we were buddies, like best friends. And so like we would go do things. If there was an office trivia night, like we would go. Or if there was something that we wanted to do, movie we wanted to watch, something like we would go do things. And I think that really helped me out a lot. I think it would have been easier for me personally if I would have had a family there. A lot of people, that's not the case because
Traveling, kind of move around job.
Yeah. Even just the job, like it's hard on families to have their father gone at hard hours for a hard job and not knowing if they're coming back and stuff like that. So, and then if you're not really on top of your personal life and your personal health, then like you go downhill so fast. And that's how alcoholism is a problem. That's why suicide's a problem. Divorce rates is a problem. Finances are a big stressor for families. And then that's just all just a kind of a downward cyclone, just right into the ground. And, so I think that just knowing that there was measures that I could take to correct it was good. And then it was corrected. Yeah. Like I felt way better after that. It's like, it all just clicks for me. I understand. It's the job. Like, it's not just me. It's not that I can't handle anything. It's not anything like that. It's just that this is part of the job. Learn how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was super talked about in the academy or in the curriculum. I'm sure that they talked about like mental health for law enforcement, and things like that. But like it's not on your top priority list.
Right. Do you think that a lot of guys or a lot of the department took away the same thing? Do you have any idea?
I hope so. I don't know.
There was at least some utility in bringing that guy in and raising, like, awareness is huge.
I would love to have him on here.
That'd be great. I think we often discount how important awareness is. People hear it and it's like, oh yeah, everybody says that. But like for you, it was a measurable
just level, knowing. Yeah. Awareness for sure.
Takes away the mystery. Yeah. Gives you a hope that you can fix it, or that that it's not your fault, that there's not something wrong with you.
Right.
That it's a normal brain body reaction.
Yeah. And probably what really helped me is that my second year, 2018, I met my wife. So like, she was a huge rock for me, probably more than I realized. And so like when we met, it would have been the fall 2018. And then, we only dated 6 months and we were engaged. But then we didn't live together until after we were married. But just having somebody to kind of go do stuff with was so huge. Mm-hmm. It's funny because like people ask Stephanie, like, like, has he told you stories and stuff like that? And like, not really. I really haven't. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because I had been so used to those 2 years kind of getting home and shutting it off. And that, if you can do that, then I think that helps with a lot of the other problems, versus just thinking about it all the time. And what is the word? It's ruminating. Mm-hmm. The more you ruminate about something, actually the worse it gets. It's just kind of backwards of how we've looked at psychology for decades. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, get all of it out there and talk about it every single week at your therapist or whatever. It's like, yeah, but at some point, like, you have to start to get over it. Like you have to start to learn how to live with it so that you can, you know, kind of defeat it and move on with your life and not let it hold you back. I never really talked to her about much. I don't know why. Just never really did. Like there's probably 1,000 stories that when I go out, so when I'm traveling back to Connecticut for work now in the private sector, I meet up with the guys and we'll go out to pizza or whatever. And that's all we talk about, like the good old days, you know, and like we'll rehash all of these memories. And I'm like, that's right. I forgot about all that. And once you're removed, it's hard too, because I forgot, you know, a lot of it until I drive through those streets again and it all comes back to me. It's kind of weird, but yeah. It's happened to me a couple of times to drive through there and be like, oh yeah, I remember what happened there. I remember what happened there. I remember, you know, that call. I remember that person. I remember that coworker coming to help me there or this situation. And it all comes back in vivid memory. I just don't think about it.
Yeah. That's weird. Cause that's like, it's kind of a common thing. Like it seems like people often don't talk about that stuff with people that they didn't go through it with.
Right. Yeah.
Like that seems like very normal. Like that's what you see. That's how you see it portrayed in the media. You know, it's like two different opposite ends of the spectrum. Like you don't talk about it with family. You don't talk about it with your kids. Like it's just like a don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. And then you get back with the guys and it's like completely different. It's like, these are the guys you went through it with and it's just a different dynamic. Like what is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that it was like, I didn't feel like she would understand. Yep. I don't think it was that. I think it was just like, I dealt with it all day. I didn't want to deal with it anymore when I got home. Yeah. And there was a few times with pretty like more serious stuff where I was like, I just have to get this out just so you know, if I'm irritable or if I'm in a bad attitude, like this is what happened today. Because my parents still don't know the stuff that I would have gone through there or the stuff that I did. You know, the calls you go to and the situations that you're in, really, serious stuff. So if my parents don't know and my wife don't know, then nobody else knows, and except for me and my coworkers. But it's not that I wouldn't share. It's just that I also didn't want to, you don't want to be the guy who comes back and you're like, look at all the cool stuff I did and telling everybody how great you are or anything like that. I never wanted to do that with that job. And you know, when people would ask me, then I would maybe open up a little bit, but I've never sat down and given a comprehensive, like, here's what I did and like take it or leave it. Yeah. So,
yeah. Speaking of talking about cool things, is it true that you had an experience on a call where you performed at a high enough level to receive some kind of accommodation?
Yeah, they're over on the wall.
So it actually happened. I couldn't quite remember what to call it. Accommodation, right? Like some kind of award or
it's all public record.
Why don't you walk us through that? Like,
man,
good day on the job for Officer Roggie.
Yeah, good day is hard. It's hard to say.
It was a rough experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Like, do you ever get an accommodation for something that was not like
they're hard to get,
intense and somewhat traumatic? It seems like that's part of the.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, like a unit commendation or something from the chief or a letter of recognition. I have a couple of those are harder to come by, but it's the people that I work with. When I go to calls with them all the time, I'm like, they should be getting these all the time. So excellent. Just everyday excellence.
Yeah. So what happened that day?
So, oh man, I was pretty new on the job. This is all public record, so anybody can go find it.
I'm going to force you to talk about it. I mean, not from a get over your trauma, but from a, like, just like you can brag about yourself.
No.
Go ahead, tell us a story.
There's lots of stories like that where just kind of like crazy. Like if you want to know what I did, go watch a few episodes of Live PD, and that's just what we did every day. So in this particular case, I was pretty new. I want to say it was the fall of 2017. So I had been on my own for a few months. Very new. They say it takes 5 years before you feel comfortable in the job, probably with most jobs at least. But so I was pretty brand new in my own car. early in the morning, worked midnights for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So I was kind of in the beginning of that and getting acclimated to working all night, sleeping all day. And I had been, kind of getting into a groove with my proactivity and stopping cars and finding drugs and trying to be a good officer at night. Because really, there's a lot less cars out, a lot less people out. The call volume is usually less, but there's more real stuff going on, if you know what I mean. Okay. Just out looking for anything. Happened to drive by a local business and saw a truck kind of backed up to an ice machine, and thought that was kind of strange. 3 a.m, whatever it was. Okay. And I was like, okay. So I walked around and I saw a guy walking toward the business, and it looked like he had something shiny in his hand. Looked to me like a knife, maybe. And he started kind of like jabbing at the door. It's kind of weird. So looped around, kind of got behind a couple buildings and was just kind of watching him for a minute, kind of giving updates to dispatch on, what I maybe was seeing. And at some point started getting more violent and throwing things like cinder blocks and bricks into the road at any passing car or whatever. So I was like, all right, got to address this. Like, something's going on here. Pulled up, boxed in his car with my car, got out, and he started approaching me from across the parking lot with his hand behind his back. So it's a red flag, number 2. I already knew he had something shiny in his hand, so I didn't know how to deal with that. He got closer, was not obeying commands at all. I had looked kind of over on the ground, and somehow he had pulled power lines down.
Huh.
Yeah. So there's power lines all over on the ground, and some damage to the building, and he had put a rope around the ice machine like he was going to drag that away.
Real weird situation.
Long story short, he had been at that establishment the day before and was kicked out and was having some kind of mental episode and decided he was going to go back and burn the place down. All news to me, and this is part people don't understand about policing. You just don't get that
context.
I don't have any of this information at the time. None. As far as I know, I don't know this guy from Adam. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious. Can you just walk us through real quick? If you did have context, obviously the priority is safety. You because of the great powers of observation that you're trained to use, you knew that he had a shiny object in his hand, and you see him walking with his hand behind his back. You already know what to look out for because you had observed that before.
Right.
But if you had, other than the stuff that you observed on the spot, if you had all the other information, would it have changed your response? As in, first priority is to get out of this alive,
yeah. Like looking back on it, there's things I could have done better if I would have known the context.
Okay,
a little bit more.
All right, carry on.
Large gentleman, 6'4", I don't know, 275 probably, large guy.
Jeez, what was that? What the heck were you thinking when you rolled up on that and
it's
thought,
probably it's honestly
me. I'm the one that showed up. Like
some of that's a little bit of new cop, just like, I'll deal with it. I'm very confident in my abilities, as you could tell. But
were you nervous when you rolled up on him?
We dealt with this individual very differently after this. Like if I would have known his history and known who he was and known some of the problems that he was having, I would have sent for way more units, like right away. So I mean, big guy coming at me, not huge, but I like to think I'm pretty formidable. I don't really back down, so I had kind of gotten in between my car and his car. He was walking toward me, not obeying commands at all. Was getting ready to draw down. Draw down
meaning,
pull my service weapon and prepare at least at the low ready. So he had gotten close enough now where I was like, okay, he's not obeying me. He's not listening to me. There's zero compliance. He's belligerent. I don't know what's behind his hand. This is getting pretty serious. It could be a knife. If it's a knife, there's a tooler drill. It's like a 21-foot rule drill.
Okay.
Which is, if somebody's within that distance, the time that it takes to close out that distance is the time that it takes to pull out your gun.
21 feet.
Yeah, so if you were to stand 21 feet away from me right now, which is, probably like that wall,
Not very far.
Nope. And I was standing here just with my, interview hands and just kind of talking to you. If you were to just take off and sprint at me, by the time I could get to my gun, pull it out, you'd be on top of me.
Okay.
So that's in the back of your mind too. People don't understand the tool or drill, like very real. This is why you can't really play around. And this is why all the time you'll watch videos and guys are like in hands distance away from the cop and they're,
so when you decide to go for if that 21-foot rule, if you decide to go, I'm assuming that whether you're taught this or not, it's, if you are willing to draw your firearm, you must also be willing to use it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So that not only are you drawing your firearm, but you're like that split second 21 feet that you have is also a decision that I'm going to use this as well, which is
I may have to use this
pressure.
Yeah.
No one understands that pressure.
It's training.
It's a different perspective.
It's training. I went right to my training.
Yeah.
And so I was at the low ready, and at that time he had pulled his hand out and brandished what looked like a large blade. It turned out to be a very long screwdriver with shaved end on it, or maybe it was filed down from him hitting the metal, whatever, sharp, kill you. That can kill you for sure. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I drew down on him and was able to get him to throw it into the back of his truck, which was huge because you don't want to take somebody's life, especially for something like this. And at the end of the day, I want to go home, so once he had kind of gotten rid of the weapon, I was able to cycle through and holster and pull taser. So it's kind of like in your mind, there's a lethal force continuum that you're constantly going through all the time. And you have to be thinking about what's appropriate use of force. What's appropriate use of force?
At every different phase of the altercation. Like now that he has his screwdriver in the back of is that kind of like
it's different. Now as far as I'm concerned, he's unarmed.
Yeah.
Unless he has something in his pocket, which he turned out to have.
Okay.
But I felt comfortable in that position being like, okay, I have disarmed him at least. He's still too close. Right. He's not obeying me. I need to subdue him.
That seems really tricky because in this lethal force continuum, it's not always black and white. For example, he could have been like, sure, I'll listen to the guy and put him at ease if I put the screwdriver in the back of my truck because I know that I've got this in my pocket. Like, how do you can't predict
you don't know
stuff.
That. This is all Monday morning quarterback stuff. You just don't. And we'll get into this. Maybe we can do this the next section about like how out of touch the public is with what this job entails.
And even maybe who you answer to after the fact? Do you think, because we've all heard the stories of the people that you work for turning against you and someone's got to be the scapegoat or whatever. Like the lethal force continuum can be I can see the lethal force continuum being interpreted differently by the people you go back and answer to and and like their opinion could be incorrect.
There's a reasonableness standard and it has to be, you have to judge police officers specifically in this profession on the information they know at the time and how a reasonable person would respond knowing that information, not knowing what you know after the fact, which is what we do nowadays, because this is exactly how we go after cops now. He should have had all the information in the world known to him and the situation should have been handled differently. When like you're talking milliseconds in some cases, possible. Like it's just no, it's not possible. Yep. You're demanding perfection, and you should be demanding excellence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this guy throws the screwdriver in the back of his truck or whatever, and you are going through the lethal continuum, lethal force continuum.
Yeah, use of force continuum.
Use of force continuum. Okay, sorry. So keep
such
going.
A civilian.
Oh, he's an idiot.
Yeah, so at that point I felt a little bit more comfortable. And it's so funny because I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit or I don't know if it's just good training, probably both. I felt in control.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah. And this was one of the first instances where I was on my own and was to that level of seriousness, I guess, or threat. And we're only talking like a couple months after being on my own too. So, but he then came close to me, made a bunch of threats, said he was going to kill me. And at one point he said, I'm going to kill you right now. And he was probably he was close. He was too close. And so fired the first round of taser probes, kind of hit him in the midsection, made him stun back a little bit. He turned around, started to walk away, and started reaching in his pocket, which is a no-no. It's a furtive movement. It's you can articulate that as reasonable for suspicion. Started to turn back toward me again, and so I hit him with the second set of probes, which hit him, I think, in the calf and somewhere in the like upper abdomen area, kind of like because he was to the side of me, so I kind of hit him in the side, and just down like a tree. And he was like, "All right, I'm done. And I'm like, "All right." So I just stood there because tasers administer. There's 2 cartridges, and once a cartridge is attached, you can send multiple 5-second bursts through it until the taser runs out of battery. So you could potentially do it many times. So I think he knew that, and I was able to just kind of stand, keep a little bit of distance, obviously radio for help, and which interestingly, like we were talking about before, when I had first gotten out of my car, I told them that I was making contact with my car radio, got out, and because he was coming toward me, young cop stuff, didn't turn on my radio. So a couple times I had said, like, he's approaching me with a weapon, and they got none of that.
Wow.
So like in that instance, they could just gone live right to my camera and seen what was happening, you know? So they got none of that. So I had no help coming. It's just, sometimes that happens. You forget, it's kind of like the flight or fight reaction. Yeah. You have to really learn how to deal with that. So he was pretty much detained at that point. Still had his hands free. Was going to wait for backup. So I then got back on the radio. I was like, I was off this whole time. No wonder they're not here yet. So I told them,
how much time had elapsed from your arrival to you standing over him?
Not much.
Yeah.
It feels like a long time. Not much.
A couple minutes.
I doubt even that much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fast.
Yeah, probably a minute and a half. Okay. I can't quite remember. But I was like, okay, like, basically I got back on the radio and said, taser deployed. And they were like, that's like
we'll be right there.
That's kind of like like we didn't know that's what was happening. So like, that was such a good shift. I already had guys coming anyways, because when it's slower and you're free and the guy in the beat next to you is working on something, you go cover him. Like, you don't sit in your parking lot on your phone and, do whatever. Like, you go and you assist. This is a dangerous job. So they weren't far away anyways, but they had upgraded them to a code 3, which is lights and sirens, obviously. Because I had this guy at taser point.
So, yeah.
And
you're like, somebody come, somebody show up.
Yep. So,
because you weren't going to try to like handcuff him alone. That was a bad idea.
No. Yeah. Bad idea.
You wait.
I had him detained. I had him where I wanted him, and there's no sense in trying to go hands on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, soon after that, my sergeant got there and a couple other guys, 2-3 other guys, and we're able to then detain him physically. Turns out, this guy has manic episodes with schizophrenic bipolar. Didn't know that. Right. Was having an episode, was not taking his medication. Which, if you know that information, if you know the person, then you know how to deal with that situation much better. I would have approached him by myself, with a history of violence and stuff like that. Like, it's just, these are things you don't know. Hey, sir, what's your ID number real quick before I make contact with you as you're vandalizing this building to burn it down? So was able to basically handle that situation pretty well, especially being new, especially the circumstances. He was well within the Tueler drill, approaching me with what certainly perceived as a weapon. I could have been justified in lethal force.
What's crazy to me is that you had the discipline to, for a moment when he's that close to you, for a moment, like basically disarm yourself when you're switching from your firearm to your taser. Like that seems scary to me. That for a moment you're helpless.
Yeah.
What like, is that a quick transition?
It's just training. I don't even remember doing it. I just remember in my head making the use of force calculations kind of like in a millisecond of being like, okay, now he's technically unarmed as far as I'm aware. Mm-hmm. This is no longer use of, I can't use this. I'm not going to use this. I won't use it.
That's
to then what's my next option? Like baton? No. Taser is a very good tool if used properly.
What is the success rate of a deployed taser? Like it seems like
Depends
the
on a lot
first
of
one
things.
didn't work. Like the first time you fired it didn't work.
Depends on a lot of things. Coats.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a taser through a coat. So wintertime matters. This was in the fall, so
does that matter in your use of force calculation?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to. All of it has to.
You hear about cops that go through situations like that where they end up on the wrong side of the news. And who knows? Like maybe they did just as good a job, and they're being unfairly judged. Like we've been talking about this whole time. But also maybe sometimes they made a slight miscalculation, which again, how much grace do we allow for the pressure of the job? That's going to happen sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Those miscalculate, but like, it's also part of the job. Like, what's your take on that? Like, what is there a, when this will kind of take us into like the perspective of the public and how difficult it is, but is there room for error, or is it, that's the job, you don't make mistakes? Because we recognize that both exist. Right. Like that 21-foot rule. Yeah. You can't be perfect 100% of the time. Like no. If you get yourself into if you have 100 of those situations in your career, are you going to be 100 out of 100? Do you know? Like probably not, right? Probably I would assume. Not. So like how much grace do we have for the pressures of the job is going to cause miscalculations?
You want my opinion?
Yes.
From the public perspective?
Your perspective and the public.
None
from the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfection is, you were saying earlier, we're too much perfection and not enough expecting excellence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're dealing with human beings.
Human beings. Yeah.
Human beings aren't perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know how to stress this more to people who want to have the whole story from a 5-second clip or whatever, or think that they have some authority to speak on policing when they have no connection, have never been in that connection, have never gone to a citizens academy or gone to a use of force simulator. Like you can do these things. If you haven't done them, then I don't know if you really have a lot to talk about.
I bet a lot of them would find out real quick how easy it is to soil yourself in those situations. Like,
yep. Yeah. But
even in a simulator,
more than that, like stress response. Yeah. Who's good at stress response?
Not everybody.
Yeah. Mostly nobody.
Yeah. Yep. We were just having a conversation about this last night. Like, how do you desensitize to traumatic situations? Like, how do doctors do it? And like, I don't think anybody's born desensitized. Yeah. Like, I think there's a certain level of desensitizing that you have to do to get good at, like, what a surgeon sees in in an injury or an ER. Yep. Like, yeah, I think you can be born equipped to do it, but like, yeah, most people aren't cut out to see those kinds of things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to work at it.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
And those who are,
Dr. Huberman talks about that. It's kind of like doing hard things. I'm gonna butcher the name of, what part of the brain that it is. You'll have to look it up for yourselves. Right, yeah. But basically, people who put themselves through voluntary stress, physical, mental, social, emotional, whatever, grow this part of their brain, literally. And you have to develop your body and develop your mind to handle situations. I would be sitting in my car all the time thinking scenarios in my head that I'd never been through, that I've never done, or rehashing ones that I have done constantly. Okay, like if I stop a car and I approach on the passenger side window and this person makes this movement, what's my reaction? This is how my brain works. I would kind of psychoanalyze every single contingency possible. Okay, if a person brandishes a weapon and then runs into an alleyway, how do I maneuver in the alleyway? What if there's this there? Can I, just in my head, I was constantly running these scenarios all the time, which I think really served me really well. So that when situations came up that were similar, not the same, I had some idea of like, I prepared for this mentally. Like I've kind of thought this over in my head. Here's some of the stuff that I was kind of looking for when I was running through this scenario in my head, or doing scenarios at the simulator or whatever. And it's just mental preparedness, taking things seriously, doing the best that you can, and hoping that the public sees that. Yeah. Because the truth is like at the end of the day, it's a jury. Yeah. And how do you perceive that to a jury who doesn't understand the job? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is it doesn't seem unfair for the public to have an opinion on, well, you are the ones that were chosen for the job. We can expect a certain level of performance without, but it's just gone so far tilt the other, like too far. Yeah. It's just gone too far.
Everybody is a sofa lawyer. Everybody is an armchair lawyer. Everybody is an expert at everything. And that makes it tough for people in professions, especially like this, where the consequences are life and death. Because the last thing you also want to do is have that in the back of your mind of how will this be perceived in the news? Because now my whole focus is out of range for what we're dealing with. And you're probably going to make different decisions if the consequence is, if this looks bad, even if I'm doing the right thing, even if I'm doing the hard thing that I have to do to perform my duties well, is there a way that this could be perceived otherwise? And will it be detrimental to me? I just won't do it. Like, why would I go and stop motor vehicles if they're just going to cause me problems? I'll just sit in a parking lot. It's kind of the sentiment. It deters you from
doing your job,
performing excellence.
Yeah. So before I forget this question, I'm going to ask you real quick back to the scenario that you were laying out for us. So we often like see the situations that go awry or don't if the public just, decides they want to make it go awry. That's what we see on the news. But here we have an example of seemingly everything went right. You did a really good job. The situation was de-escalated. Everything went well. When he's, in handcuffs in the car and it's all done, it's all over, and you're like taking your breather, what's going through your mind when the situation is finally like, I don't know if mentally, if you de-escalated for hours, like you probably were still adrenaline.
Right.
But like, you're sitting on the curb, like what's going through your mind in a situation as a police officer where you did everything right and it was a success? Like,
right.
What's it like mentally? What's going through your mind?
I think that once I realized he had the secondary weapon, which is kind of always what you assume. If you take a gun off of somebody, you assume they have another one.
Oh, okay.
It's just kind of a rule of thumb. It's just how you be proactive and
prepared.
Try to deal with it with some intelligence. Like if it's a better way to think than if that's all they have and then they don't have that, I remember thinking that could have gone so much worse if he wouldn't have complied and thrown that in the back of his truck and kept coming toward me. It would have forced my hand. And then my whole life would have changed. Like it would have been, I've never really even thought about the weight of that, I guess. There's something about defending versus being the offender in my mind as far as values goes. I think that is laid out biblically as well. I could make that argument. So to be in a position where you potentially have to take somebody's life is not fun. I remember the first thing I remember doing is being like, wow, this is fresh in my mind. I need to get it on paper. Like I need to get my report taken care of, which you have to do anyways. But I wanted to make sure that I did my due diligence in giving my perspective on what I saw, what I felt, articulating exactly what happened. But when I got home that night, I think I walked into my apartment, and like when I walked into my apartment, I was like the gravity hit me of the situation. Like I could have not come back here tonight. Like it's just but there's definitely adrenaline, and there's definitely you kind of get over some of that quick because it's the job. Yeah. Like if that wouldn't have been the way that it was, and I just know so many situations where you have to be able to move on quick. And so, whether it's doing CPR on somebody who didn't make it and then going to a small fender bender, like, do you think that person is really with you at that fender bender, or are they thinking about what they were just doing? And that's a pretty mild example. The stuff that you see, you kind of I had to learn quick how to just shrug it off and move on and be okay with it. I know that a lot of psychologists would say like that's like you're repressing that stuff and eventually you have to come out with it or whatever. But I feel completely at peace about it. I'm very happy with how it went. Luckily, I never had to use lethal force ever in my career there, and a lot of cops don't have to, which is great. But the way that you protect people from having to use of force is being well-rounded police officer, good with your hands, good with how you talk, good with your use of force continuum cycles, like knowing what you can do, relate to people, be nice. It's okay to be nice. There has to be a line too, like you, at some point you have to say like, look,
be an authority.
I'm a representation of the law. Mm-hmm. You have to do what I say. This is a legal command. This is a lawful order. But it doesn't mean you can't treat people with respect. Mm-hmm. And I am not let me just put this out there. I am not a law enforcement is always right absolutist at all. I feel like I see both sides of the coin in a lot of situations, but and there's lots of room for lots of cops to do way better. So I'm not trying to be too hard on the public or law enforcement. I just think that mutual respect is needed.
Yeah.
It's sorely lacking.
I think it's good for people, anybody who hears you talk about the aftermath of that situation. I hope it gives them a little grace on what's expected of police officers so that the next time they see somebody that was in that situation, but theirs went the direction where it got them on the news, that they can maybe think a little more critically about.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think they felt when that situation was said and done?
Yeah.
They had to go back to their car. They had to sit in there and they had to think about what just happened. They had probably wished it could go a million different ways, like just to have a little more grace and understanding for how intense those situations are. And like, there's a human in there when it's all said and done. There's still a human in there, who has their own thoughts and feelings, what they could have done better. It's just, I'm really glad that you get to share that situation, because that is exactly the kind of stuff that ends up on the news, and people need to know what is actually happening in real life, but also inside your mind when it's all said and done. And you're human too.
And I didn't have a family to come home to at the time. Might have affected me differently. Like if I would have come through that door and had like my girls come running up to me, like maybe it hits different. So like there is so much nuance to all this, and it depends on the person. It depends on their mental state, depends on their familial structure. All of that stuff matters. And so while I may have handled it how I feel well after the fact, like that same situation could have affected somebody else very differently. So I think that needs to be said. But also as far as the public goes, just relax. Give it a second. Give it 5 minutes until the details come out. The truth is that an interaction like that, realistically, there's not a lot of parties that are directly involved, right? So if it makes the news, somehow people feel like they're directly involved and need to see action taken right away when they don't know the full story. You really don't.
How much are news organizations the problem?
Yeah, good amount.
So it's public. It's often the public is the victim.
It's hard because like they need a business model that produces news. Mm-hmm. And so how do you do that responsibly? Could definitely be done better.
Yeah.
But
probably never going to go back now that monetization is the driving force.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And more money.
Yeah. But I wish that people would you can go online, you can read comments for 5 seconds, and you know exactly the pulse. Mm-hmm. You'll watch a video clip come up and it looks bad, but maybe it wasn't. And this is the other part of law enforcement people don't understand. Sometimes doing the right thing looks bad because it's just the nature of the situation is not pretty, and it's not like cohesive and fun. And like, if I was standing here with two of my officer buddies and you decided I'm not letting them take me, do you have any idea how that would look if three guys were wrestling one guy? Mm-hmm. The public sees it's 3 versus 1. They're using excessive force. The public doesn't understand that it takes at least 3 people to subdue somebody.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to wrestle somebody who doesn't want to go down? Like,
good luck.
One-on-one is not good
luck.
odds. Yeah.
Then you factor in mental illness. Then you factor in drug use. Then you factor in, just different levels of rage for EDPs and stuff like that. Like, good luck. We had to hold down a guy one time with 4 guys, strong police officers.
That's life. Yeah,
everybody took a limb. That's how strong he was. I'm sure that it didn't look good.
People have no idea what it takes to physically restrain somebody.
Yeah, go try it sometime.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Go try it sometime.
And also, just sidebar, and also to expect law enforcement to willingly accept fair play, that's ridiculous.
Sure.
Like, you want to have your job is to serve and protect. You want to have 2-3 guys. This isn't the Geneva Convention. Like, this isn't like, yes, there is a difference between, this is my opinion, there's a difference between, acceptable force and like the odds need to be fair. Well, that's a criminal. Like, let's subdue the criminal.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about fair play, right?
Right. And that is why at the end of the day that you have to exert just enough force that you can restrain the person without using excessive force. And that gauge moves as the interaction is playing out. Furtive movement, hands in the pockets, not listening, turning away, raising their hands, turning to side like they're going to punch. All of these things are things that officers are computing in real time and having to make the appropriate response. And look, people aren't perfect. Cops aren't perfect. There's going to be mistakes. And I think that it's right. If you would put yourself in those shoes, number one, you can go to a citizens academy. They're held all over the place. You can reach out to your local law enforcement agency, go on a ride along, go to the use of force simulator, do it.
Yeah.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Go and experience just a small taste of it. And I guarantee it's going to make you feel different. I guarantee it.
Good question.
Yep.
So I'm like running a theory through my mind here. I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that the more officers you have responding to, like, say it's a single person situation, like, that's actually, it's like the whole dull knife, sharp knife scenario, like situation metaphor again. Like, do you, two thoughts here. Do you really want one officer wrestling one person?
No.
I feel like that's more dangerous
than
3 who have the ability to subdue him safely.
Right.
Now, this is my second question. Do you think that situations like, we're talking statistics now, in scenarios where it's a 1v1 situation, whether it's physical, whether it's just a wrestling type situation, or it's a pursuit with a firearm like it's a chasing pursuit, if it's a 1v1,
been there, done all that stuff.
Okay. Do those end up more often in a worse ending than if you have multiple officers responding? Like, is it statistically, do you want more people responding than just a 1v1?
For sure.
Yeah, the people need to like get that through their minds.
For sure.
The more, the better. If they're all performing their job correctly and not just beating up on a guy, like, the more, the better.
Go to a family gathering.
It's not getting up on people.
Yeah,
it's what you want.
Yeah. Go to a family gathering, pick out one person that is going to be restrained, whatever size, doesn't matter. And then pick one person to restrain that person, then do 2, then do 3. And you tell me.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's just common sense. That's common sense stuff.
Yeah. Less risk of injury, like
all of it.
Yeah.
Or just more eyes, more cameras. It
Right.
gets better. Yeah. And also, this is the part of what you're talking about that the public doesn't understand. You don't know what's in pockets. You don't know what's in waistbands. You don't know who's coming. I've seen instances where officers are wrestling with somebody and somebody just comes up and just kicks them for no reason and then runs away. Like, you have to have social awareness. You have to have spatial awareness to know who's around you, to know what's happening while you're interacting with this person, while you're watching their hands to see if they're reaching for something. Like, it doesn't take long to reach for a knife, man. It doesn't take long to reach for a gun.
Yeah. Right.
And so, like, those things are in the back of your mind already. So people just need to chill.
Yeah. You want to complain about excessive force. You should start reversing the way you think about it. Like, You want this person to end up with a better outcome.
Yeah.
You want 2 or 3 more guys there.
Yeah, and it's safer for the subject as well.
Yeah.
So like it's a win. It's a win all
Exactly.
around.
Yeah.
Which when you're talking resources, like maybe in the larger cities where this is like a constant thing that's always going on, and there's always issues and shots fired and all that, you just can't.
Yeah.
Like there's
one example of where that might break down, and I think this didn't help that idea, is with the George Floyd incident. There were more people there, and nobody said anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the right or wrong. I'm not the judge. I'm not the judge or jury on that situation. But it seemed like if there was excessive force being used, the example that we're laying out, that usually it's better to have more people, like, again, because we're human, even that's not perfect. Like there was people there that could have helped.
And at least on the base level there, what did help that situation is it's more eyes.
More eyes.
So like
exactly
at the very minimum, I would say, of what they were supposed to be doing there, and we won't get too much into it because, like I said, I wasn't there either. There's 4 body cameras versus 1 that gets knocked off onto the ground somewhere that you don't really get any footage of. There's cell phones too and stuff like that, but that's not always there, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean,
interesting perspective.
Base level, it's more eyes.
Yep.
You know, even if it's
very important,
even if there's malpractice, even if there's something that's not being done correctly, there's more eyes, there's more transparency, there's more sunlight. Safety
for the perpetrator involved is people don't think about that. Like the outcome.
Well,
is
the first thing that you see when you're like, oh, you got 4 police here for 1 guy, you know, you get that all the time. Like, this is a little excessive, don't you think? And it's like, not really. No. Like if our resources are allocated to this for this, like there's probably a reason.
You want to be so outraged and concerned about the outcome.
Sure.
You should be glad that there's 4 people there.
And look, I am not against people, like, pull out your phone. Like, law enforcement is a public service. You have every right to video them. And this is something that police need to get into their heads. You're going to be recorded. Be professional. Be professional. It's okay. You see lots of cops are like, why are you recording me? Yeah. They get offended. It's their right, unless it's interfering with, you know, oh, they're recording me not getting their license and registration as I asked. That's different kind of story. Like, yeah, because that's kind of interfering at that point. But stop being offended.
Yeah. That goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the episode is maybe it's possible that officers that would respond personally to that situation, like they haven't been in the right place for a while. Like the job's gotten to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Stressed out.
Yep. And like I said, that there's so much nuance there too, because I'm not coming down on people who get offended. I'm sure I was offended at times.
It's annoying, but how you handle it is important.
Especially when you're getting called a white supremacist cop every day and whatever else. Yeah. But the job gets to you. Your home life gets to you. The calls get to you. The shift work gets to you. The part of your brain that's constantly alert. It's not healthy. It's not good for you if you're not watching it. If your family's in disarray, if your finances are in disarray, if the last thing you want to hear is one person chewing you out for nothing or being belligerent or whatever after you had been dealing with a whole day of death and destruction or whatever it is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That is how you get those interactions most of the time. If I don't know a lot of people who, for the sole reason of being grumpy, they're just gonna be grumpy. Like usually there's a lot of causes to that. I would urge people, here's how you get stopped by police real quick. Hands on your steering wheel. Don't reach for anything. Yes, sir. No, sir. Comply with all demands. If you feel like you were mistreated, get a badge number, take it up later. It's going to be on camera. Record it if you want. Put the phone in your cup holder. And if you feel like you're being mistreated, do not resist. When you resist, you open yourself up for problems. It's actually illegal to resist arrest, even if the arrest is wrongful. Does that make sense? So I would just comply. Yes or no, sir. Here's my documentations or an order, whatever. And if you feel like you're being mistreated, deal with it at the police department later. And hopefully it gets dealt with if it's
found
to have cause.
Yeah. Be prepared. Like just as much as it's an officer's job to be prepared.
Yeah.
Like I've been driving occasionally throughout my life, and I've thought to myself, let me like run through a scenario. If I were to get pulled over right now with my specific situation here, like what would I say? How would I act? And like, I'll like run it through. Yeah. Like there are ways that you can be prepared to respectfully deal. You don't have to be disrespectful. You just don't. You can be respectful and still express yourself respectfully.
For sure.
Deal with it after. There's no reason to be disrespectful.
Yeah. And
the same thing that we expect police officers, the same way we expect police officers to behave when they pull up and see you recording, and we don't want them to be offended and whatever. Like you can also follow that same rule.
Yeah.
Like it just takes both.
Yep. Yeah. And the problem is like you might have 100 interactions with police, but as soon as you have one bad one, it kind of paints the entire painting with that brush. And people kind of forget all of the littler interactions where people are, where it's a good outcome, you know, and a respectful exchange and everything goes fine and whatever. And I think that people need to start understanding perspective with that a little bit. And don't reach for stuff when you're in your car. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people come up and they're like, well, I always reach into my glove box and grab my papers. That way I have them ready for them already. Stupid. It's just kind of what you would think, because you're like, I want to be prepared and ready for the stop. But if you're walking up on that car as an officer and you see somebody rummaging around a glove box or a middle console or reaching down, you know, whatever, it's just furtive movement. It doesn't mean that it's just something for the officer to keep alert to, because traffic stops and domestic violence, stuff like that, are the highest risk.
Yeah. Put the hands on the steering wheel and
car stop tactics aside, but
yeah.
But no,
it's we didn't really get to touch on the specifics of your job because you did a lot of things. So we will have to do this again, and then we can go into it's just, I think it's so interesting, and I honestly think people want to hear it. So I think we could dedicate many episodes to your police career. But
fun.
Next time we can touch a little bit on like things you liked about it and all the different assignments they put you on and what you liked and didn't like.
Because I need to make that super clear to anybody who's listening who thinks that like I'm doom and gloom at all. I'm not. Like probably some of the most impactful years of my life, definitely. Great job. Like I said before, if you're looking for some purpose, there's not a lot of professions you can do that offer that kind of meaningfulness. But I enjoyed it. All the opportunities I got, the specialized units that I got to be a part of, the experience that I have, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. The people I worked with, the city that I worked in, just wonderful people.
Yeah, like it all culminated into a pretty solid experience. It all kind of came together.
Yeah, and I have no ill feelings. That was probably one of we were talking about in the last episode, you know, or with Bob Chamberlain. Like I really feel like I left there on the best terms I could have. And I mean, I think that was good leadership. It was good, you know, teammates around me. It was good coworkers, and then, you know, for the most part, the public is great. Yeah. So
now you're spending your time running a business. Do you miss it? And do you ever like see yourself? Do you ever give plans to ever give it get back into it, or do you just not? Whatever the future holds.
At this stage, I'm not there. Yeah. But it's not like it's ruled out if I needed that as a possibility. Yeah. I have a lot of state trooper friends in New York. We're friends with the sheriff locally. A lot of people at the sheriff's department. I've been asked many times if I'd be interested in coming back, staying with the state police. But we're in a good place now. It was getting a little crazy at the end of my time in Connecticut, the uprisings and the pandemic and just a lot. And
you got into it right when stuff hit the fan for
pretty much
like years, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. For all the law enforcement and fire and EMS people out there during COVID. I don't know if I've seen more heroes in my life. Like I remember going like suiting up like in Dwight Schrute's hazmat suit, like to go into at the very beginning stages. We didn't know what we were dealing with. And they just did it anyway. Yeah. They just did it. And so I have a lot of respect for them. I don't think that I would do it again, at least now, because having family definitely changed my perspective a little bit. It was getting a little bit hard at the end with, the protests and kind of the anti-cop sentiment and stuff that was going around, where if I would have had a family at home, I think that I would have more reservation.
For sure.
But maybe more rural settings would be fine too. I'm not opposed to the idea. I loved it. It was one job. I told Stephanie, my wife, I was like, I never had one day where I was like, oh man, I got to go into work. Wow. Which is like pretty
rare.
Yeah. It's a pretty hard thing to find.
Pretty rare.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So it must mean it was good.
Yeah.
So
it's awesome. Well, can't wait to go more in depth.
Thanks for doing this. It's fun.
Assignment side. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. It's a lot of, it's a lot of sensitive information. It's a sensitive topic. I personally don't know. I grew up military, so I've been around a little bit of it. But so I personally don't know, or I've never met anybody where these things were like super easy to talk about. So yeah, thanks I appreciate you opening up and telling the stories and kind of reliving it a little bit.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Not sure how hard that is, but yeah, thank you very much for sharing all that stuff. I think it was really important for people to hear. This is what the day-to-day looks like, and this is what it feels like for the people who are in it. And this is, and maybe if there's a message in the podcast, I think people could just try to have a little more grace and understanding of what the job entails. And I think that you kind of laid that out perfectly, very nicely. So thanks for sharing all that sensitive stuff.
Yeah, it was fun.
Appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun.
We'll do it again.
Cool. See ya.